Hello and welcome back. In this Java for Testers tutorial, we'll learn about the array list in Java. So as we have understood in the previous tutorial about the collections framework, we briefly discussed what the collection framework is, what are the interfaces and classes available, how you can go through the Java docs and understand the details of the collections, interfaces and classes. So now the important concept or the important collection that we are going to discuss is basically the class, the ArrayList class that is there, and what exactly this array list we can achieve with the ArrayList. Now if we discuss about the arrays, so in arrays we can only store, or we have to define the size upfront, and we can define or store the values of a particular type. Now in the case of array list, we can, or in the case of list, basically we can store any type of values in the list. Okay, so let me create a class and name it as ArrayList demo, and let me include the main method. Okay, so now in order to use ArrayList, so if we go to the documentation and search for ArrayList, so we'll get the class. It's a Java util class. It's a part of the collections framework. It's a class ArrayList, and here you see in the angle brackets, this E basically means the elements, or you can define the type. So this is the concept of generics, which I'll also cover. And what this basically does is it's a resizable array implementation of the list interface. Okay, when we say list interface, in the list interface you can have the duplicate value, which we'll see with the example. So you can have the dynamic values, you can resize. So based on the values that you store in the list, the size can automatically grow. It's not like the array where we have to define the size upfront and then we can only store those many values in the array. So in ArrayList, it's a dynamic and resizable array. So to use this particular class, because it's a class, we can create an object of this class, right? So if we go to the ArrayList, what we can do is we can say ArrayList, and we can say new, and I can say ArrayList. So I can create an object of ArrayList class, and if we just hover over, you can import ArrayList, which is from java.util, right? And the array will be gone. Now the ArrayList has been created. Now to add the values, so basically at the moment this is just an object, there are no values in this particular ArrayList. So to add the values to the list, what we need to do is we have certain methods. So we can say al dot, and you'll see all the methods that are available in this particular class. You will see those methods are being listed here. So you can see add object. So you'll see that it accepts, or you can add the object. So if I say add and I say 10, then the value 10 will be stored as an object and not as an integer. And that is why the wrapper class, or the wrapper wrapping and unwrapping, or auto boxing and unboxing, needs to be understood prior to coming to this particular tutorial. So we have already covered that in the previous tutorial, so this shouldn't be a problem here. Now I can also store, I can say I want to add another value, and I can say string here, right? Or I'll say I'll store a string. Okay, so now the same list contains the integer and string, and this is possible because these values are being wrapped into the specific object. So now this is neither an integer, neither a string. It's basically stored within this array list as an object, and this is auto boxed. Now the next thing is, now there are two values in the list. So now for example, I want to get the size of the list. So I can say al dot size. There is a method size, and it will return the size of the list. So I can simply print the size. So let me print it in the console. and this will print the size. If I want to see what all values are there in the list, I can say simply sysout, and I can print the list directly. So I can just pass the reference of this variable, ArrayList variable, and it will print the list. So if I run this program, you can see the size is 2, and there are 2 values that I have stored, and those 2 values are printed here. So if I add one more, so if I say al.add, and I can store any other object here. So for example, I'll say a boolean value, it will accept that value as well, right? Now if I run this, the size will be 3, and there are 3 values. So this is about how you can create the array list and add the values to the array list and get size and the actual array list that has been printed. So now we have seen how to add the items to list. So I'll say add items to array list, and say for example now you want to remove the items from the array list. So how you can do that? So remove, and for removing there is a method remove, and you can just provide the index of the item that you want to remove. So there are 3 items. So index, as we know, it starts from 0. So if we say specify 0th index, the first item, which is basically 10, will be removed. So if I say index 0, and then I want to print the list again, let me save it and run it, the item 10 will be removed, and finally the array list with 2 values will be printed, right? So this is how you will remove the items from the list. Now let me add a couple of more items. So can I add the duplicate items in the list? Let me add these 2 items again, and then again print the list after adding these 2 items which are sort of duplicate. So you can see, yes, ArrayList can store duplicate items. So there can be duplicate items in the list. When we talk about set, duplication is not allowed in the set. So set has to have the unique values. So set won't accept duplicate values. In case of ArrayList, you can store duplicate values in the ArrayList. So that's about defining the ArrayList, adding the items and removing the items. So now how can you get the particular items? So for example, you want to fetch the items. So how you can fetch the items from the ArrayList? You can simply have the method get. So use the method get, and it will get the value that is at that particular index. If for example I want to fetch the value that is at the index 0, I can use al.get method and specify the index, and if I print the value there, then it will print, or it will fetch that particular value and print it, right? So you can see RCV has been printed and it has fetched this particular value and printed. Okay, so that's how you will fetch the values from the array list. Now we have also seen the removal, addition, fetching the items. And the next thing is, for example, see, ideally what you will be doing is, for example, you are trying to automate some web page, and there are the web elements available, or there are there is some data that is available that you want to store into the list, and you want to iterate through and verify that particular data is what you are expecting as part of your test case. So that's where all these collections classes or collection framework in Java will be really helpful. So now if you want to store the data, so you won't be keep doing it just by adding or calling add method, remove method one by one. So you'll be using the iterator, or you'll be using the loops in order to get the values from the list. Okay, so how you can implement, or what all options are available? So the first and foremost thing is basically to use the for loop. Okay, let me add a couple of more items so that we can use the for loop, and you can see the values being printed and what all options are available to get the values out of the list. So simple for loop. So if we say for and I'll define int I is equal to 1, and the next thing is, so we know that there is a size method which will give me the size of the list, right? So we can simply say list, and here the list is, or the object of the list is the variable al. So we can say al dot size, and this will give me the size of the list. And we can just say while I is less than or equal to the size, then I plus plus, simple for loop, and then we'll just keep printing the values that are present in the list. So this will iterate through the items of the list and will print the values that are present at that particular index. So what it will do is, I'll use the method here. So I'll say al dot get, and then in the index I'll pass this I. All right. So now if I run this program, you will see, oh, there is array index out of bound. I think I have removed something. So I have fetched this value, and so this is getting removed. Let me see what is the size. So index 6. Okay, I know what the issue is. So basically I'm starting from 1, so it should be 0, because when we are starting, it should, the first index is 0th index, right? So now it should be starting from 0, and then it should be less than the total size. So for example, the size is 6. So actually the array list or array basically start from the 0 and 1 less than the size, right? So that is why now, because there was no index 6 in that particular case, I got index 6 out of bound for length 6, because the total length of the list is 6. So I can't have it less than or equal to 6. So it has to be less than 6 when we say. And now you can see that all the values have been printed. Okay, let me comment out all the other statements. Okay, and print again. So it has fetched me all the values that are being added in the list, right? So there are more values. Ideally there should be just 6. I think there is one more print statement somewhere. Yeah, this is the one. So let me remove that as well, and if I print it now, so there are 6 values in the list that have been printed. So this is the first option. Now say for example, I want to use for each loop. For each loop is the better option as compared to for loop. So it's simpler. So what we can do is we can simply say to use the for each loop. So for each object. So because these are all objects, so we can say we haven't specified the type of object as such. So when we'll understand the generics, we'll explain about the objects as well. So I can say for all objects, say obj in the list. And what is the list? List is al. I'll simply say print object, right? So this is simplified for loop and much easier to use. So if I comment this out and run this, it will give me the same results, right? So it has printed the same values. Now the third option is to use the iterator. So iterator is a method in this list. So whatever list we have created, so ArrayList, if we say al dot iterator, so this is a method, and if we see the details, it returns an iterator over the element in the list in a proper sequence. So we'll simply use this particular method, and it's the return type is the iterator. So we'll simply store it in the iterator, and I'll say itr and just import the iterator from java.util. Okay, and now we can use the while loop. So for example, while, so there is a method iterator dot has next. So what this has next does is it basically returns true if the iteration has more elements. So it keeps checking the elements in the list, and as far as there are elements in the list, it will keep returning true, and then you can use this has next method to print those elements. So simply we'll use the while loop. So we'll say while iterator itr dot has next, right? So we'll simply use this method to check whether there are elements, and then as far as there are elements, I'll simply say print out the next element. So we'll say itr dot next, and what this next method does is it returns the next element in the iteration. So it returns the element, the actual element, and it will, so we are actually printing those values. And now if I run this, you will see we'll get the same result for this particular case as well. So these are some of the methods or the ways that you can use to fetch the elements from the array list. Now the next important concept in ArrayList is basically to understand the concept of generics. So now here what we are doing is we are storing different types of elements in the same list, array list. So integer or string or boolean. Now in Java, what the concept of generics is basically, if we go to the documentation, what they have defined in ArrayList is the element in the angular bracket. We can specify which type of elements these are, whether they are integer or whether they are boolean, or so you can specify the actual type into the angular bracket. And as we know, there are the wrapper classes for each primitive data type in Java. So we can, if you want to store only integer values, then we can use the integer class here. And how we will do it, so for example, here we haven't defined any specific data type there. So to define the specific, so for example, I only want to store integer values into this array list. So we simply use the angular bracket and define the type as integer, and then when we are creating the array list, we use the same here. Okay, and with this particular case, if you'll see that all other values that I have added, I've started getting error for that. So when we define an array list with the generics, or we specify the type of the items that can go into this array list, that's the concept of generic. So if I want to store any other types, so for example, I want to store only string here, then I just specify the string and it will only have the strings in this particular array list. So let me change it to integer, and then we can remove, or we can change all these values to integer, and the errors will be gone. So now I have changed everything to integer. So now only integer values are being accepted in this particular array list, and the errors are gone. So this is the concept of generics. Now let us understand why this concept of generics was introduced. So for example, if I don't use this integer, so as it was before, and I had stored different values in this particular array list. Okay, now say for example, I want to fetch this value 10. So I'll use the method al.get, and because this is at index 0, I'll just specify the index 0. And now, so for example, this is an integer value, right? I mean, in the array list, it's stored as an object, so it will return an object when we say get. Now, if I want to store it into the primitive data type, can I do that? So I can't do that because there is a type mismatch, because this is an object. So when we say .get, the 0th index, it returns an object, and I'm trying to store it into the primitive data type, which is of type integer. So I have to use the type casting. So I have to cast. So basically I can say integer, and then the error will be gone. So this object is being converted or typecasted into integer, and then I can store it into this particular primitive data type. And to avoid this sort of typecastingness, now say for example, the next element is the string. So now when you are dynamically using the iterator and dynamically getting the values, you don't know what values or what type of values are stored in the array list. the first value could be integer, second value could be boolean, third value could be string, if you're not specifically defining the type of values that you are going to store. So that is why it was introduced, to have the specific type of values, or mention the specific type of values or predefined values when you are defining or creating an object of the array list or any other collection class in Java, so that you can only store those type of values. Now if I have defined the integer in this particular case, then I don't have to manually typecast it. I can automatically, in this particular case, now this value can automatically be assigned to primitive data type, right? That's the advantage of having generics or using generics in the array list. So that's all about the array list in Java. I would highly recommend going through this particular Java doc and familiarize yourself with the methods that are available. Just read through the description, and these are pretty self-explanatory method and will help you a lot in the Selenium automation or normal Java development. So that's all for this tutorial. Hope you like it. Please do share and subscribe, and thank you for watching.